What's up? Welcome to your Self-Helpless snack, where we give you a little taste of the Self-Helpless podcast with a mini episode. If you want to dive deeper into this topic, you can find the full episode linked in this episode's description. Please enjoy this bite, you beautiful person. What are some common misconceptions about the adoption process or just adopting a child in general?
There's so many different types of adoptions that the misconceptions or, those kind of questions really will depend on the type of adoption you're actually asking about. So the best way for me to answer that is to say, it depends on the type of adoption you're looking to do. Now, the most popular type of adoption right now, I would say, is either newborn adoption, when a couple is trying to adopt a newborn baby, or foster care adoption. So I can start with foster care adoption when you're adopting someone, a child from foster care. One of the biggest misconceptions with foster care adoption, a lot of people believe that these kids are kind of too broken for them to adopt them, or they're too traumatized for us to adopt them. And so a lot of families actually look to adopting newborn children because they just think that they're not going to have to deal with the trauma. That's a huge misconception because even babies who are adopting from right out of the womb still carry trauma. But there's a lot of studies that show that adoption, whether you're newborn or 15 years old, still creates trauma in the brain of the child. So I would say that's probably the number one biggest misconception that I see when families are looking to adopt. They're thinking, oh, let's do a newborn because they won't be as traumatized as the older child.
Oh, wow.
Really, the best way to move forward is just get educated about trauma in general and be open to adopting older children because whichever age you adopt, you're going to have to deal with it versus going in with the mindset of, I have to have a newborn so I don't have to deal with the trauma. Like you're going to deal with it anyway,
Yeah. And even if somebody's having a biological child, there's going to be probably trauma at some point. Somebody says
Yes.
something mean to them at school or something
Yes.
like that. It's just kind of part of life.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
Everyone comes
interesting.
with their own stuff. Yeah. Biological or not. So absolutely. You're completely right, Delaney.
And if somebody wants to adopt, what is their very first step to take?
That depends on the type of adoption because
Mhm.
there's so many. So I covered newborn adoption and foster care very briefly, but there's also international adoption for those who are looking to adopt, obviously, outside of the country. The first step that I tell people is they need to understand the pros and cons of all of their options. What happens is they go on social media or Google, stuff like we all do, and they get all this information and then they just kind of go with what they research. And then they end up wasting a ton of money and a ton of time, and then they're still not adopting. So my number one advice is you need to understand the pros and cons of all of your adoption options first. Understand what international adoption means and what that's going to mean for you, pros and cons of that, newborn adoption, foster care adoption, and then decide which path you want to go because whichever path you decide, it's literally like going three like opposite directions, whether you do newborn, foster care, or international. And so you want to know for sure which path you want to take because once you take that road, you're committed. You're spending money, you're working with professionals, all that kind of thing. But what most people do is they think, okay, I'm going to adopt a child, go on Facebook groups, like be a part of all these Facebook groups, go on Instagram, whatever. And I'm going to just do my home study because that's what people tell them to do. And that's actually the number one mistake that people make is just deciding to adopt and then getting their home study done. So my thing is with people is you need to like just shove your home study down the drain for just a little bit, like put it on the side and really do your research, get educated about the pros and cons, and then commit to one. And then once you get on that path, have a guide help you get through so that you can actually adapt successfully.
Can you explain what a home study is?
Yeah. So the home study is basically a report that a caseworker does on your family to basically let the judge know that you are a fit family to adopt. And they're looking for things like if you're a felon or if you've abused children or if you don't have enough money to take care of a child or if your home is unsafe. So the report is really like they meet with you and your family, they do visits in your home, they go through your cupboards, like they make sure everything looks safe. And then they look at your household income. They ask you all kinds of questions from like the time you were born until now. Like your life is exposed. And the point of that is just to make sure that if we're letting you bring a kid into your home, we're not going to have to take this kid out of your home again because now you're abusing them, right? Or bring more misery to that child. And so every single person who wants to adopt has to go through the home study process. It's just not the first thing that you should do when you're starting out.
Yeah.
My husband and I, we've talked a lot about this as the only way that we would probably ever become parents is if we adopt a child. But we always hear it's really expensive. It takes so long. You're going to be waiting for years. But hearing you say that it just depends on what kind of adoption you're going for. Is there a certain type of adoption that
isn't as expensive or does not take as long?
There are adoptions they're just known to be the least expensive way to adopt. So that's foster care adoption. Adopting from foster care is the least expensive way wherever you're in the United States to adopt, just because the state covers a lot of your expenses. More expensive way to adopt is through international, just because you're dealing with another country. So it's just a lot more paperwork, all that kind of thing. International adoption also takes longer because you're dealing with another country and you have to get paperwork approved here and there, travel back and forth. So it's just because of the time and the work that it takes to go through the countries and all the paperwork, it just happens to be more expensive. And I would say kind of in the middle would be newborn adoption or adopting here in the United States. So the length of time, honestly, really depends on how well you know how to go through the process. I help my clients actually go through the process and adopt within a year, because what happens is a lot of people get stuck because they don't know how to navigate through the process successfully. So honestly, like there's no reason why anyone shouldn't be able to adopt within a year if you just follow the process like you're supposed to. Where people get stuck is social media and researching, because there's so much information out there and like, do this is what I did, and this is how I adopted, that people get stuck on somebody's story and they think that's what they need to do to adopt. But that may not be the best fit for their family. So it really is like a case by case, what works with your family type of thing. And when you have the right guide going through the process, there's no reason why you shouldn't adopt within a year. And if you know how to navigate through it, I should add that, how to not get scammed, how to not give your money to these professionals. And then 6 months later, you still are not making any progress, that kind of thing.
My gosh, I didn't even think about that. Oh, it's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah, it is horrible. And a lot of, unfortunately, adoption has become a business, which I hope there is a way that we can turn that around, because a lot of the professionals out there are actually crooks. I'm so grateful because the United States has been kind of honing down on a lot of them. And I'm hoping that we can somehow have some type of accountability for adoption professionals who are taking money from parents, so they can actually show like, where is this money going? There was this big adoption agency that just got like totally slammed because they were doing so many unethical things. They were taking people's money and not really showing their profiles. I mean, it's really become a business for people because they care more about the profits they're getting from people than actually helping you connect with a mom and adopt like the way that they're supposed to. So because of that, people are obviously afraid of, oh my gosh, if I give my money to this person, how do I know for sure they're going to help me? But there are still people out there who are honest and who have integrity and who are trying to help parents. You just have to know how to navigate through and find the right people to help you.
Thank you for tuning in to Self-Helpless. You can find our brand new merch, Patreon community, and other fun goodies at selfhelplesspodcast.com. We'd be thrilled if you left an Apple Podcast review, shared this episode with a friend, or post about it on Instagram and tag us at Self-Helpless Podcast so we could repost you and say hi. As an independently produced show, we sincerely appreciate your support. Thanks, everybody.